Yes, the Member of Parliament for St. James North.
No, you don't. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, of course, this is my first presentation to this honourable chamber, and I first have to express my deep gratitude to the people of St. James North for giving me this opportunity to serve them in this August forum and to, by extension, serve the people of Barbados. I certainly pledge to do my best in their cause and to have a long association with the people of St. James North in this chambers, representing them at this level. Now, Mr. Speaker, the presentation of estimates of a government's revenue and expenditure for any incoming year ought to be informed by a philosophy of where the government of the day wishes to locate a society and an economy in the immediate future. It ought to be a policy statement and a strategy of how Barbadians, both locally and overseas, of how investors can determine their business and gauge their lives. It ought to have a vision of where a government wishes to take a society and an economy. And what we heard yesterday in the presentation by the Honourable Minister, Finance Member for St. Michael Northwest, was the usual strategy of this government since it came into office in 2008, of a lack of vision of where it wishes to locate Barbados. Under the Barbados Labour Party, when we were last in office, we had a vision of where we wished to take Barbados. We had a vision of making Barbados the smallest developed country in the world by 2025. And we brought out a strategy plan, a national strategic plan, which was debated in this Parliament in our second term, which sought to say how we plan to move Barbados to be the smallest developed country in the world. We do not see any such philosophy, any such vision, any such strategy coming from this government of the day. The minister's presentation provided little, if any, hope to the unemployed in this society. The 13% odd unemployed in this society. I can say that in St. James North, Mr. Speaker, unemployment rate is much higher than that. I estimate it at over 25%. And certainly among young people, both men and women, it is around 35%. And there is little, if any, hope to those unemployed people in Douglas Road, in Sion Hill, in Aston Hall, in this presentation by the Minister of Finance. Provides little hope, Mr. Speaker, to the business people of this country, to foreign investors, to the housewives of this country. It speaks towards the creation of 1,000 new jobs at its best by a stimulus package of $600 million. Those 1,000 new jobs, Mr. Speaker, if they come to be realized, and we're taking it at its best, will make very little difference to the unemployment rate in Barbados. I mean, the statistics show an employment of about 125,000 odd people in Barbados. So simple math will show you that creation of 1,000 new jobs is less than 1%. It will make hardly any dent, if any at all, to the unemployed people in my constituency, who every day, are desperate and despairing because of this government's policies. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition yesterday, Mr. Speaker, spoke about government's revenue projection continuing to slide downwards by $235 million, while its expenditure is up. We heard from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, about a current account fiscal deficit of 6.6% of GDP, being twice what it was projected to be a year ago. There's been no strategy in either the throne speech which was delivered earlier this month, in the Democratic Labour Party manifesto presented to the people a couple months ago, or in the Minister of Finance's presentation as to how government intends to lead our island out of this junk economic status which we have gained during the course of its governance last year, as has been certified by 2 international rating agencies. How are we going to get out of this status of junk bonds and junk economy? How are we going to be able to borrow on the foreign international market these funds that are displayed in the estimates if we are in this status? How are we going to create any just society when there is no just economy? It is impossible. And the presentation by the Honourable Minister yesterday, Mr. Speaker, must therefore be deemed a fairy tale and a fiction of the highest order. The Minister's contention that income tax revenue is down as a result of income tax adjustments belies reality, because the income tax adjustments came in to effect last year, August, after the fiscal year had started. We contend, and clearly the downward slide of income tax revenue collection is a direct result of the rising unemployment rate in this country. Because clearly, the more people who are working, the more income tax and tax revenues that come into play. So a major issue, Mr. Speaker, is the collection of taxes in this country. You know, this Parliament raises taxes, a lot of taxes, and there's a serious dislocation between the taxes that this Parliament passes and those that it collects. You know, the Honourable Prime Minister has now found it fit to appoint the person who is regarded as the most business-oriented Member of Parliament on that side as Minister of International Business and Minister of Commerce, having responsibility for the corporate affairs. And we would hope that he is able to bring some kind of leadership to the collection of taxes in this country. He speaks towards the bureaucratic nature of government and the need to reform the public sector. And one can feel his frustration when he spoke in his last ministry on this issue. And clearly this is an issue that the government needs to address. But we have not heard anything as of now from any of the speakers on the government side as to how it plans to deal with this serious problem of collection of taxes in this country. Of course, while we speak about collection of taxes, the government of a day also has the duty to pay people, whether business people or otherwise, the taxes which they are owed. And the problem of which the Chamber of Commerce, I believe it was, spoke a couple months ago about $50 million being owed to business people in this country, is $50 million in tax refunds being owed to the business people of this country is one that the government has to address and which we have heard nothing about so far. I know for sure, Mr. Speaker, VAT refunds and corporate, certainly VAT refunds. Yeah. I know for sure, Mr. Speaker, that people who have presented to the bank their invoices for payment of the reverse tax credit have not been able to access those funds, the $1,300. So the question is whether really and truly we have a government that is broke. Yes, people have not been able to get, some of my constituents, not been able to get their tax refunds on reverse tax.
I don't remember if you want to talk to them directly. I remember, do it outside. Otherwise, please speak to the chair. Thank you very much. Yes, I remember.
Yeah, I really. Yeah, but no, they can't allow misinformation, even in a maiden speech, to go out, Mr. Speaker. So your member, I think, is not deliberately, but he's misleading the House, Mr. Speaker, sir, and giving the impression that persons who receive tax returns have been trying to draw them on the bank and not receiving them. Mr. Speaker, as you know, tax returns are now done electronically, and therefore the lodgements are sent straight to the bank by way of cash, so you just present and get your cash. But for those odd ones where you have checks given for reverse tax credits, all those checks are honored by the bank, I believe the Barbados National Bank, well, the Republic Bank.
Very well, I remember.
And therefore it is not true to say that. And I really think that the honourable member should stay the course.
Honourable member, please continue.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that some constituents of mine have told me that they have been able to get the funds from their reverse tax credits, and that is a fact. What is also a fact, too, Mr. Speaker, is that all sectors of economic activity in this country are down. This stimulus package presented yesterday of $600 million will not bring growth in either the tourism sector of this country, the manufacturing sector of this country, or the international financial services sector of this country. It will not bring growth in the agricultural sector, in the international business sector. Insufficient funds have been given to seriously revitalize these areas of economic activity and foreign exchange earning sectors. The much promulgated new area of economic activity, the energy sector, is yet to get off the ground. Even though, Mr. Speaker, the last Minister of the Environment under the Barbados Labour Party governance in 2007 brought a comprehensive energy policy before this Parliament, and which was made, I believe, a document of the House. As was stated by the Honourable Minister yesterday, Finance, the Barbados Labour Party, the late Prime Minister JMG Tom Adams, brought the international financial and business sector to Barbados some 30 years ago. And it therefore pains us tremendously on this side to know that I believe it's estimated that $2.7 billion have left this country and gone to other parts of the Caribbean because of the failure of this government to speedily and urgently implement policies and regulations that could have saved this great sector of this country. Many jobs have been lost, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality of the situation, whether the Honourable Member of Parliament for St. Philip North, St. Philip South wishes to accept that or not. Many jobs have been lost to other CARICOM and Caribbean countries because of the failure of this government to speedily implement policies. That is what the business sector have said. We have a government, Mr. Speaker, which continually blames the international economy and the last Labour Party administration for its failings to generate a just society and a just economy. You know, Mr. Speaker, we are now into the second term of this Democratic Labour Party governance. And I would really have thought that they would have at least left that behind for the first term. Because we are now into 63 months since the Democratic Labour Party was returned to office in January 2008. And I believe strongly, Mr. Speaker, that big men and big women should stand up and take their responsibilities, whether in family life, whether in governance, whether in sports, whatever. Take responsibility. And we can't keep on blaming and a global international recession that ended a couple years ago for the failings of their governance. We have in sub-Sahara Africa, Mr. Speaker, 40 countries growing last year at a rate of 5%. We have Caribbean countries on average growing at a rate of 2%. Barbados' economy either standing still or, I believe, 0.5% last year. We have, and this is what we have to compare it to, Mr. Speaker, our neighboring islands. We have Latin American countries growing average of 3-4% last year and the year before. We can't be continually comparing our country to Greece, where we have multi-billionaires not paying income taxes, people with mega yachts as long as the length of Broad Street not paying income tax. That is why Greece has got into problems. Or I heard the Honourable Minister yesterday, Minister of Finance yesterday, quoting Cyprus and riots in Cyprus. In Cyprus, same thing. Many investors, many wealthy people not paying tax, and an attempt now by the Cyprus government to levy some kind of income tax on them. How does that have a connection with our society? Our society. We have even the United States, one of our main trading partners, growing 2.6% last year. Last month, 236,000 jobs being created in the economy of the United States of America. We have Canada, again one of our main trading partners, one of our main sources of tourists, never having gone into economic recession at all. But we continue to quote Italy and Greece and Cyprus and Ireland, countries that bear no relation to it. And the government of the day really needs to take into account the fact that, for example, our tourism sector has declined or is doing the worst in the Caribbean outside of Montserrat, as the leader of the opposition, Honourable Leader, said yesterday. And Montserrat, as we all know, the misfortune that has struck Montserrat. And this is not something that we ought to be proud of. We heard the Honourable Minister of Tourism yesterday, Member of Parliament, St. Michael, South Central, speak towards tourism. Where are the new tourist attractions in this country, which will lure tourists to Barbados? We have had closures of Bowes, we have had closures of Graham Hall. Where is the policy and the philosophy of the government, the strategy to create new tourist attractions and keep our main aspect of foreign exchange earnings fresh and revitalized when we compare it to other Caribbean countries? And then, Mr. Speaker, we have the government continuously blaming the last Labour Party government for its woes. The reality of the situation, Mr. Speaker, is that this Democratic Labour Party government took over a country with an unemployment rate of 6.7%. 6.7%. The lowest unemployment rate in the history of this country since the abolition of slavery 175 years ago. And that was a platform on which they ought to have built on. But instead, we continue to hear about the Labour Party government, last Labour Party administration, wasting funds on a prison. But what, Mr. Speaker, was the last Labour Party government to do? Glenderry burnt down. A prison had to be rebuilt. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition didn't burn down the prison any more than any member on that side burnt it down. So this abdication. Yeah. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the members of Parliament in St. Philip and there are many Filipinos on this side, sir, all recognize that the prison located in St. Philip was a wonderful facility, Mr. Speaker. We have, contrarily, Mr. Speaker, seen no concerted attempt by the government of the day to save jobs. We've had the closure of Ammon Beach Hotel. 500 jobs just gone through the doors. Many of the people employed at Ammon Beach up to a year ago coming from St. James North. So many of my constituents, Mr. Speaker, both the man and the woman in the house, now no longer employed because of the closure of Ammon, when that could have been saved. Where are we seeing these jobs? We hear about reopening of Ammon, but we see no real plans to reopen it. We know about the closure of NCO, again hundreds of jobs in information technology, many again employed of those people in St. James North, and we see this continuing trend in the governance of the Democratic Labour Party from the 1980s, because in 1986, August, we had the closure of Intel. And like what the Honourable Member for St. Lucie said, Intel was closed when the Democratic Labour Party was in office in August 1986, after the DLP came back into office on the 28th of May 1986. It was not closed under Barbados Labour Party administration. We see the closure, relocation of many international business companies under this administration. And, Mr. Speaker, any government of the day has to address two main issues. One, the unemployment rate in this country, which, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central said, is unacceptably high. And the inability of the government to generate foreign exchange earnings and to have the main economic activity areas of this country stimulated. And we see no real, we on this side see no real imagination or vision on how either of those serious social issues will be addressed in the foreseeable future under this government. We heard the Honourable Minister of Social Care speak just now, Member of Parliament for St. Michael Central, as the Welfare to Work programme. One person in each constituency getting a job. One family. I don't know how much difference that has made or can make in this country, sir. The reality of the situation is that $2 million has been cut from the poverty alleviation funds in this estimate as compared to last year. We heard about how supplementals have been brought in the last few years to top this up, but the reality again is that we started out with more money allocated in estimates for poverty alleviation, and they were topped up too the same way. So we started with $2 million less. In a situation, Mr. Speaker, where 19.8% of Barbadians, 1 in every 5, has lived below the poverty line, as shown by the study that came out in April last year. And I would venture to say, Mr. Speaker, that 19.8% has grown even further now, with unemployment rate rising and the closure of Ammon and with other major businesses in Barbados. Every day people being laid off from jobs in this country. Where is the salvation in these estimates for the most vulnerable in this society? Where is the salvation, Mr. Speaker, for the disabled in this society? Because a large part of that 20% of people living below the poverty line are disabled mentally or physically or otherwise, and really cannot help themselves. I look forward, Mr. Speaker, to the bringing to Parliament of disabilities legislation where we can have a full debate on the plight of the disabled in this country. There is, Mr. Speaker, no indication in these estimates for any plans for any development in St. James North. And this is really sad, Mr. Speaker. Are the people of St. James North being punished because for the last 70 years, bar one term, they have loyally supported the Barbados Labour Party?
I remember you have 4 minutes in which to conclude.
We see, to move on to the Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker, of which I have shadow responsibility for. This ministry is being provided this year with $9 million less than it was the year before. $500 million, down from $509 million. And that was down, Mr. Speaker, from $530 million approved in the fiscal year 2011-12. And how are we going to build these campuses at Barbados Community College and Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic if we continuously cut the estimates given to the Ministry of Education? You know, there was one time when the Ministry of Education was allocated 20% of the budget, not too long ago. Now it is down to 15% of the budget. It would have been better, Mr. Speaker, for this government to have implemented the Labour Party's policy to establish the University College of Barbados, which would have combined the administrations of the tertiary institutions and consequentially reduced the cost of running the same. What is the policy of the Ministry of Education? Recent policy, Mr. Speaker, besides renaming schools, some of which are after people who have had no association in the past with those schools. Where is the allocation, Mr. Speaker, of funds to train children from primary school to be more entrepreneurial, to be more creative in their thinking and in their problem solving, to be more innovative? Where are the funds to finally allow children with disabilities to access free, comprehensive education like the rest of society? We still have a situation where many parents of children with disabilities have to pay between $400, $1,200 a semester at private schools for their children at primary school level. But yet we can boast, or we seek to boast, about free, comprehensive secondary education since the 1950s and early 60s. The Minister of Education himself, Mr. Speaker, admitted before the National Advisory Council on Education that his government was not doing enough for children with special needs and that the budget for their provision should be increased. Where is the funding, Mr. Speaker, that we can completely extend the textbook loan scheme to those primary school students who cannot afford textbooks? Where is the funding to reduce the rate of 40% secondary school children leaving school without any certification? How can a government in this day and age, the year 2013 of our Lord, only be allocating $70 million to Cave Hill campus when it takes $150 million a year to run this institution? And the $150 million, Mr. Speaker, that was allocated last year for Cave Hill campus was in fact a decrease of 17.5% below the previous year's figure. You know, Mr. Speaker, are we into a situation soon where Barbadian students at K-Ville campus will have to start paying their full economic costs, and not only an amenity fee of $700, I believe it is?
Honourable Member, please wind up.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to a full debate on the Promise Amended Education Act, which has been mooted arising out of the Alexandra fiasco. Mr. Speaker, in summary, these estimates will do nothing to advance this society, to advance this economy. It gives no hope to the people who are desperate today, who are without a job, who are suffering, who go to sleep in the night in spite of what the last speaker said, the Honourable Minister of Social Care, hungry. It will do nothing to help pay the electricity bills, the water bills that I am sure all of us face during the general election campaign from our constituents. It will do nothing, Mr. Speaker, to advance the cause of Barbados, to move it to the smallest developed country in the world, which this Labour Party had earmarked for our country by the year 2025.
Thank you, Honourable Member.